Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them, to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com. I'm here today with my guest, Joe Tripodi. Today's topic: lessons learned over a storied, and I do mean storied, marketing career. Now, Joe has been the CMO for some great companies. I'm going to take a really deep breath and read them off: Subway, Allstate, Coca-Cola, the Bank of New York, Mastercard, and Seagram. He also has significant board experience, having served on the boards of Voya Financial, Playfight Sports, and Zeus Fire and Protection. Full disclosure, I've known Joe since we met at the first meeting of the Marketing 50 in, I hesitate to say this year, 2004. I thought it would be great to pick Joe's brain on several marketing topics and hear his advice for those looking to advance their career. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Mike. And I say we've come a long way, baby. You know that?
we certainly have. Still kicking, too, while we're at it. I'm just saying. So it's great to see you. And let's just start. The most important lessons you learned during your career. You were at big brands, big budgets, a bunch of different industries. What are some lessons, constant lessons or constants you would share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think, well, one that's actually a little sad is once you no longer have those big budgets, no one knows you anymore.
I know. So, it's like, who are these two guys talking on this podcast?
You're everyone's friend, but don't take it personally. I think what I found, my number one lesson, it's all about teamwork. And, if you think you're going in as a savior and you have that mindset, that's not the right approach. It all has to be how you work together as a team. It's also very critical, in my experience, to understand the operational side of the business, not just the marketing. I was fortunate at Coke to be chief marketing and commercial officer. So you had to live with understanding customer needs, merchandising, retailing, all those kind of things. At Allstate, we had in the marketing group, we also had a customer experience group, which was great to understand that. And of course, at Subway, I also, in addition to marketing, had food product and safety and food safety, which was kind of an important thing in a QSR business. So those were kind of some of the lessons I would say. And also, I think advertising just cannot solve all business problems. When you get into some of these jobs, and let's say the prior CMO has exited, and you come in and they think you're the savior, and they think maybe naively, even at a board level, that an ad campaign is going to change the trajectory of their business. That's just not going to be the case. It may well be that you have a pricing problem, a distribution problem, a quality problem, a lack of innovation problem. All those things contribute to the success or the failure of a brand. And getting people's head around that, including the CEO, including the senior management team, because frequently, they think of marketing as advertising. And that's been certainly something I've seen in my career. And you have to correct that. And you got to say, well, it's a lot, advertising is one part of the pie, but there are all these other dimensions of this job. So those are some of I would say, the key lessons that I've picked up over the years.
I think that is dead on, spot on. And I will say personally, I never have fired the agency when I showed up, because that is a signal to the company that you're going to solve all the problems with a new agency and some new creative, when usually, if you look at the ops, sometimes it's the marketing, but usually it's not the marketing that's causing the company to not win. And if you don't understand those financials and how the company really works, you will actually make a promise you can't keep.
Oh, Mike, you're 1,000% right. And I've always felt the same thing. Now I've had some tough conversations with agencies when I've got to, and I said, listen, we need better. You made this brand look small. It needs to feel bigger, but at the end of the day, you have to figure out how do you work with them to improve, as opposed to say, and you're so right. You set you up. Well, geez, the agency came in, they covered a new campaign, but our business didn't change. Oh, what happened? So that is something that I think particularly as a new CMO coming in, you don't get in that trap, because if you're in that trap, you got a big problem.
Totally agree. So when you change a lot of industries, what's the biggest difference when you change industries?
Well, I always say a widget's a widget's a widget. So, I think the principles of consumer engagement and marketing are the same regardless of what you're selling, in my view. And that's going to be, ruthlessly focused on the customer, on innovation, on teamwork, on the ability to share wisdom, learning, knowledge out around your company as much as possible globally. You can't have people operating in silos. You've got to come in as CMO and say, listen, we're going to work together kind of in a network model where we share the good, the bad, and the ugly more aggressively. That will help us. So I would say, it's from my perspective, it's always been, how do you get people on the team, in the boat with you, and not just the people working for you, also the senior leadership team that you're working with, and your CEO, because you've got to manage those expectations very, very carefully. Otherwise, they think there's going to be magic and instant change is going to occur. And frequently that's not the case. So I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of different CEOs, and all of them had a different style. Right. But I think it's critical that when you get in there, you kind of take them down the path of, here's how things are going to evolve and change. So there isn't some unrealistic expectation on the front end.
Hey, so you've had a lot of successes, and I'm sure there's a bunch of disappointments.
Mm-hmm.
You want to share a story or two, or would you share a story or two, and what you learned from that setback?
Yeah, I've got a lot of failures I can talk to. Number one was, I woke up one day, I was in the office at Mastercard, and this kind of vision came to me that we would rebrand Mastercard as the future of money. And this was basically in the early 1990s, when chip cards were just starting to get into the consumer's hands, even though there was no functionality to chip card. So we went out and launched this campaign, Mastercard, the future of money. What I didn't realize and at the time, quite frankly, was that the customer of Mastercard, if you looked at pictorial imagery techniques, the picture that kind of really kind of was the essence of what a Mastercard cardholder was a small porch in middle America with a little soft light on. It wasn't the future of money. So I was trying to leap to something that was out of the DNA of the brand, which I would say is also probably some of the lesson from Bud Light. Probably don't try to go someplace too aggressively. You've got to kind of wean your customer off of that. That would be one. I would say another thing that I learned was kind of waiting for perfection before launching a product. We had, I thought, a very good business card product, a fleet card product at Mastercard, and we waited to get it perfect. Visa came in with a less functional product, and they captured the marketplace. Another one is Martell Cognac. When I was at Seagram, fun brand, but we were targeting kind of old gentlemen's clubs, when really the market was African-American in bars, and so we said, geez, we're missing who the overall customer is here. And so we pivoted at that point. And then I would say, don't underestimate, particularly when you're in kind of a multi-market or transnational alliance with a company. Don't underestimate the politics of branding. I can tell you that the battles I had in Europe with Europeans who owned Eurocard, and they were a partner with Mastercard. And I was trying to say, wait a minute, your consumer wants a global product. They don't want to be European. They want to be global. And those were huge battles because it was very emotional for them. It signified control, that Mastercard wanted to take control of the payment system in Europe. And that really wasn't the case. We were looking for greater synergy in order to gain greater velocity of the business.
So that means giving up power if I'm on the other side of this, and giving up my choice to run the brand and accepting some central tenets. That's a super hard one.
It is.
What's a lesson from that on how to do it?
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to, ultimately if you're not engaging with them and not you have to appear not threatening. We don't want to threaten you. We want to be a business partner. I can remember doing a lot of conversations with very senior bankers in Europe. But, at that point, they didn't see the credit card business as an opportunity to make huge profits. I said, look at it. Citibank's making billions of dollars a year in credit card. why aren't you the German banks, the biggest German banks, some of the biggest in the world, they didn't want to play there. And I said, well, why would you want not to have a presence in that space? And it was more the fact that they saw the whole thing as control, right? And they wanted to control the payment system. And they were afraid that Mastercard, just like we did in the US, was going to license the industrials, GE, GM, AT&T. And they didn't want that. They saw the banking system in Europe was for the banks. So that was a tough sell. Eventually, though, it caught up with everybody. And eventually they realized that it was better for them and their consumers to be global, and have a global acceptances, because we weren't going to put Eurocard stickers on the doors of millions of merchants in the US. That wasn't going to happen, right? The other final one I would say is when we were at Coke, all with good intention, we did a can that was a white can, in order to kind of put money towards polar bear survival in that kind of world. And sometimes this is the consequence of the consequence. The can was white. In some airlines with flight attendants, they thought that was a Diet Coke. Really, it was a full Coke. It was regular Coca-Cola. Gave that to some passengers who might have had diabetes. And, we had a little problem there. So we quickly kind of scrambled, and we should have thought of that when we did the packaging design around that. But so I could go on endlessly, Mike, with mistakes, but fortunately we had a few more hits than we had errors.
And when you make the mistake, I guess the thing is, incorporate it into your head and don't do it again, like in the Coke can. Think what's the worst thing that can happen, not what is the best thing that will happen, because the best thing is easy to manage. The worst thing is really hard to manage. So you've got to really think that through, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. When you have to recall from the bottlers, like billions of cans, that's not a good thing. So
it can get you canned, in fact. So you talked a little bit about Budweiser, and I know you recently contributed to an article on brands taking a stand on issues. And one of your co-authors was Kim Whitler, who's been on the show 3 times, I think, or maybe at least 3. Tell us a little bit about that article, and then what advice you would give to marketers on this issue.
Yeah, I think Kim is a wonderful person to work with. She's a great professor. I think she created a very simple matrix on how you should be thinking about this in your organization. First of all, it would be your organizational position on issues, social issues, or wherever you're playing.
Economic issues. Yeah.
It should not just be one person's decision, right? It needs to have kind of broader support, including at a board level, if you decide to go down that path. And I think some of this was, don't let activism, distract you from your purpose as a brand and as a company. It's easy to get sidetracked on those things. And I also would say, from my own personal experience, don't try to solve all the world's problems. Find 1 or 2 things that are aligned closely with your business and what you do, and support that in a deep way, as opposed to being a mile wide and an inch deep. But I think the big lesson from Kim's study was, don't turn off your base of customers and your distributors and everybody in your ecosystem by taking a stand on something that might not resonate with them. And I think she cited a number of things in the article, whether it was, obviously the Bud Light, it was also Coca-Cola and their position on the voting rules in Georgia, which, rubbed a lot of not only bottlers, but also other entities the wrong way. So I think it was very simple. So she just created a simple matrix. Understand what you stand for, understand who your customers are, understand your whole ecosystem of the people you work with, and then just take a systematic approach to this, as opposed to an emotional, that's one person's cause, I need to support that. And that makes so much sense for companies to do that. Just step back and think about the implications, as you say, the consequences of the consequences, right?
And these are super consequences. If for our listeners, we did a show with Kim Whitler, who was also previously a CMO before she became a professor at the Darden School, called the Budweiser case, how not to manage a political stand, which is, these are asymmetrical risks.
Yep.
If the people that are mad at you stop buying, the people that are happy with you usually don't buy anymore.
Well, exactly.
So you
Bingo.
are, in order to make a point, in many times you are hurting your brand, and because your customers aren't really walking through the grocery store picking 100 different brands based on their social political stand, but they will pick against you if they're mad at you.
Yeah.
And so an important thing to absorb. Now, we're touching on this, so I'll just get right to the question. Seth Matlins joined us to share his thoughts that the CMO job is the hardest job in business. If it's not the hardest, it's surely one of the hardest. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily, I think that might be an extreme position. My sense is that marketing is a multi-layer kind of team sport. And I think if the CMO is positioned or seen as, quote, the savior, in my experience, you need to get everybody in the boat. You need to say, as I mentioned earlier, and, I think you're the guide. You guide people. You got to get there on board, understand this is where we're going. So it can be a hardest in business because the expectations can be unrealistic, around, the ad campaign is going to solve all our business problems. But I think if you set the proper expectations and pace it accordingly, here's what we're going to do, and you inform everyone, then there are no surprises. Because in my experience, and of course this goes through the board level and senior leaders and mostly all the companies I work for, they really think that sometimes a new ad campaign is going to solve broader business issues, and that's a little naivete. So, I do think that there's so many shifts going on in marketing, digital, social, mobile, gaming, AI, et cetera, that these are tools though. They're tools to help you. Don't get seduced by the tools. In my view, you got to stay focused on your customer's needs and kind of sometimes bring your customer along with them. Many are ready to leap into some of these things right away, and many customers are not prepared to leap in right away. So, in our experience also, particularly at Coke, we looked at what we call 70-20-10. Let's put 70% of resources against those things that we know work and we're very confident work. 20% innovating off of that 70. Said, okay, we're going to do innovation off that. But then 10% that's far out, different, way off the range, and take the risk and just ring fence that. Now, unfortunately, in many companies, when they cut the budget, they cut the 10% and you're stuck, right? But, and there are cases, Mike, where the brand needs a complete overhaul and a complete transformation. But, in some instances, it needs some tweaking or just some reinvigoration of what it stands for. But sometimes the complete brand overhaul is not necessarily the solution for you.
Well, and this is also expectations, which is it's easy to say we need a complete overhaul. Right. It's really hard to do one.
Yep.
Just within the company, much less so all the consumers that may or may not want that overhaul.
Correct.
And so almost always, to me, this is a thing about expectations, which is if we're going to overhaul the brand, we got to be pretty serious on how long that's going to take and where it might not work versus, and this is where I think CMOs get in a lot of trouble. They say, we'll overhaul the brand, we'll change the creative, we'll put in this new stuff and it will be all gold. And boy, that is a marketplace waiting to turn on you and eat you alive.
I agree.
So when you look, the CMO job is evolving at speed. That's one of Seth's points. And the old tools are failing maybe faster than the new tools can be measured.
Yep.
What do you think about that? And is that the biggest challenge facing CMOs today, or is it something else?
Yeah. Well, I think everything is happening so quickly now, Mike, that it's hard to keep pace with everything if you're the CMO, particularly in a large multinational. There's just so much going on. But that's why it's so important I've always believed, that people need to get out of their silos. People are way too siloed in big organizations, and sometimes they have their own agendas. But I said my role is to connect. I may not break down your silo, but my role as a leader would be to connect all the silos so that we're sharing the best practices. We're sharing the wisdom, learning, knowledge. What worked there in Australia? That's just a great example for Coca-Cola. We launched, we had, I can remember 2 young marketers came to see me in Atlanta at Coke. And they said, Joe, we have this idea that came from an agency, and it's going to be to take the name Coca-Cola off the bottle and can and put in the 50 most common first names in Australia. And I said, are you out of your effing mind? I said, are you kidding? You think I'm going to go and be able to sell that to my boss, the CEO? And then when I got into it and started digging in, I said, well, you know what? This is very interesting. The business had flatlined in Australia and we needed a jolt, right? And so it became, there wasn't a lot of media with this. It all was on social media. It was people, it was right when social media was getting bigger and bigger, and people would see that can with their name, their name or their friend's name. They say, hey, I found this can, I'm buying it. So then what happened then, it turned around that business. Instead of growing at 1%, we started growing at 3 or 4% in Australia. And then lo and behold, other countries, Japan wanted it, China wanted it, and they wanted their own version because it wasn't just about names. And then ultimately it spread to Europe, and then it spread to Latin America, and then ultimately finally came to the US. So, and that was, share a Coke with a friend, basically.
I can only imagine how much the bottlers and the packaging folks loved that challenge.
Yes. They always say, well, what would happen if these names aren't popular? No one wants to buy them. Well, then
we'll have a million Ian. We'll have a million Ian.
Exactly.
That's
So
right here.
But that turned out to be the most successful promotion in Coke's history. And it just came, so the ability to see an idea, a powerful idea, and kind of reform it a little bit, tweak it a little so it can work broadly. That was a great learning.
Hey, so one of the things that is always a challenge at CMO, or we think it is when you get a new CEO. You were at Mastercard and made it through three CEOs.
Yep.
What's the advice you would give someone when they get a new CEO? How did you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question because I came in with the first one, who I knew well. It was a great fellow. And then he left, and another fellow came in named Gene Lockhart. Gene is an incredibly bright guy. And I can tell you my first meeting with Gene, who met me in my office, we sat down and I said, Gene, here are the 10 things you need to do here. So it was brutal, candid, and very, very spot on. Here are the things, in my view, you need to do to fix this business and getting it rolling in the right direction. To this day, Gene, who I see here around in town, he always says to me, what I loved about Joe was he gave it to me straight right there on the first day. And so
I think he did. He came to your office, which is a pretty big signal that he really wants to hear you.
Exactly. I agree. And that's advice that I give to people. Just if you're starting new in a job, don't sit down in your big chair in your office, go to them. But I would say that was I think that's a way to kind of, to get their trust and to say, listen, I'm objective enough to say, we didn't do everything right. Here's things that we need to do better. This is what you should be thinking about. So he really appreciated that, and others appreciated that I used that technique on. So that was one thing. And then just kind of manage expectations. Let's have checkpoints in, every 30, 60, 90 days that we're talking about what progress, what are we all aligned with? What do we have to do and get accomplished in this next time period? So those kind of things, just no surprises management, Mike.
Let me follow in on this because I agree. Most CEOs want that blunt, direct feedback, but some of them don't.
Right.
And they will take it as an immediate challenge to their authority. How do you sense that out or suss that out before you go full direct? Or do you just say, I'm going direct, and if you don't like it, it's probably not going to work anyways?
Yeah, my experience was, I think after a couple meetings, with either as a senior leadership team meeting or one-on-one meeting, you can get some kind of sense of whether that individual is receptive to hearing the truth, so to speak, and the fact that, that may need to be change required. Who was the general who said, if you don't like change, you like irrelevance.
Yeah.
And I always add, or unemployment, even less. So, so you've got to be thinking, and most of the CEOs who are coming in, they kind of they understand they're coming in because it could have been a retirement. I've just gone through that with one of the boards I'm on, retirement, and they're new in the chair, and they really appreciate, kind of someone saying, a board member or a senior leader coming in saying, here are the things that you need to be thinking about as you take the reins here, here's the things that are going well, and here are things that we can improve upon. And my sense is you can get that sense in the first few meetings with an individual, how they would think about that.
Right. And beneath that whole discussion point if you think they're not receptive, you may not want to come in with the full,
Right.
where it is, because, I have had an experience with the CEO that said they wanted to hear all that, but then really did it, took
Right.
it as very threatening.
Right.
And I pulled back when that CEO started going around the room after discussion saying, let's rate the other functions on a scale of 1 to 10. And I'm like, I can see where this is going. I'm way back.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
One of the things that that has happened in the course of your career is that evolution of marketing. And we just talked about tools and setting expectations. If you're sitting in the seat, what recommendation would you give CMOs or folks that work with them on how to manage AI and big data and all these new tools that are coming in? How should they be preparing for what's next?
Yeah. Well, I would tell anybody, my advice to anybody in those kind of situations is try to understand at least a minimal level, the emerging trends in marketing and your industry and how you marry the two together. And you don't need to be an expert. You just need to build some awareness and speak the language and have the ability to ask the right questions. That's critical. And then I would say, as you go in and look at the changes that are occurring, you've got to find people that you value teamwork, integrity, low ego people. All of those things are very, very helpful. But I think it's all about people have to have that kind of spark in them for continuous learning and evolution. And you're constantly pushing your people to say, maybe this AI is a very new area. I'm fully supportive you going away for a week and doing a deep dive and course on AI and what it can be for our business, as long as you come back and then share that information. So, in my experience, you have to understand these trends. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to understand them. And then you've got to try to apply your skills and marry the two things together, because those are just tools. AI is a tool. How we use that tool. Social is a tool. How do we use it to advantage our company and our brand? Beneath this advice you just gave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear you saying one size does not fit all for these tools. Correct.
Depending on the industry you're in.
Yes.
That tool may work really well for you or not. But when people say we want to do this like those folks do it, that may or may not be right for you. And
Correct.
you at least have some knowledge as to say why it is or why it isn't.
That's right.
Correct. Okay.
And you can't stay static. You want people who are intellectually curious or looking to continuously learn and evolve. If you come into a new role, there might be people who've been long timers or very comfortable, and that's threatening to them. And ultimately, you have to give them the opportunity to change and evolve. But if they don't, then sadly, you kind of have to get a new team around you. So,
all right. Well, we're almost running out of time, so we're at our traditional last question.
Yeah,
the two-parter. You can take both or one, but you have to take at least one.
Okay.
And it's practical advice to our audience that we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah.
And or funniest story you can tell on the air.
Okay.
Both.
All right. I might be able to do both here. Well, practical advice, and I saw this so much, is don't believe your own bullshit, quite frankly. In our industry, Mike, there's plenty of ego in our industry. And
it's usually extroverted ego as well. Not like introverted ego. It's out there.
Exactly.
Right in the head. Yeah.
And they think that they've, they say, wait, geez, we're at Coke. We're like 130 years old. There's been a few people before us that helped build this business. So, try to remain humble and hungry. You're standing on the shoulders of giants. And, but it is our industry, from the agencies and from everything you can get everybody loves you when you have the big budget. So you can get distorted in your whole thinking about what you need to do in order to be successful there. It's all about teamwork and integrity from my point of view. The funny story would be, and it's kind of apropos given where we were yesterday, in 2000, we ran a promotion at Seagram's called Captain Morgan for President. And there wasn't a lot of, going on with everybody knew it was Bush versus Gore. And so we did we launched the campaign at Mardi Gras. We announced his candidacy at Mardi Gras. We went to the conventions with the captain, and and in those days, it was very difficult to get the networks to take any liquor advertising, hard liquor advertising, and I was begging anybody to take it. But we produced a commercial, that had like a typical campaign headquarters, and the camera's following these young people, and they're talking, these two young people, a man and a woman, and they say, what is he doing? He doesn't know anything. And they end up in this room, and you're seeing the back of like four people's heads. And then these two people, then you see the two people looking, and they say, do you know anything about running a campaign? And they turn in, and why am I drawing a blank? The Louisiana guy, that was the campaign manager for Clinton.
Oh, yeah. James Carville.
James Carville. He's in the hot tub with four women, and it was hilarious. And that Sunday, after the contested election, on Meet the Press, they had Mary Matlin and James Carville there. And at the end of the show, the moderator turns to James Carville and said, "James, what the heck is this?" And they showed the commercial on national television. And he said, "Well, I was just having a little fun," James Carville said. It was pretty, it was quite a moment for us that we got it in that way on television.
Okay, so I think the Captain Morgan for president is a good way to end this show. Thank you for joining us, Joe, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, and the I Hear Everything network, which include: Is the CMO job the hardest job in business? Is your next best customer an AI bot? It's a bird, it's a plane, holy shit, it's AI. And the Budweiser case, how not to manage a socio-political issue. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.